This is a Falmer, a blind, twisted creature that lives in the deepest caves below Skyrim. But the Falmer weren't always so deformed. They actually used to look like this, and they were called the Snow Elves. And Skyrim even used to belong to them. So where did things go wrong? Well, to understand this, we're gonna have to go back to the Merethic Era. Back then, Skyrim was mostly populated by the Snow Elves, which is why when Isgramor came along, he called the land Mereth, which means Land of the Elves. And by the way, Merethic Era means Era of the Elves, so basically back then, Tamriel was just a bunch of elves running around. Anyway, back to Isgramor. He's this dude who came to Skyrim to escape the civil war of his homeland, Atmora, and the people that came with him later became known as the Nords. For a while, the Atmorans and the elves lived peacefully together. However, this all ended suddenly in an event known as the Night of Tears, when the elves invaded Sarthal, the first human-constructed city in Skyrim. They killed everyone, with the exception of Isgramor and his two sons, who managed to escape. We don't know exactly why the elves attacked Sarthal, but the prevailing theory is that the humans unearthed a mysterious artifact known as the Eye of Magnus. What the Eye of Magnus actually is or does is unknown, except for the fact that it is immensely powerful, as Quaranir says, which would explain why the elves wanted so desperately to prevent the humans from obtaining it. Quaranir also refers to it as the Eye of Magnus, as your people have taken to calling it, implying that the term Eye of Magnus may be a misattribution, and that the eye may not even have anything to do with Magnus. In fact, some people have theorized that it may be connected in some way to Kinmune, but we're not gonna talk about that in this video. In any case, like I said, Isgramor and his sons survived the Night of Tears. They sailed all the way back to Atmora, gathered 500 companions, and sailed back to Skyrim, though one of Isgramor's sons died on the way. When the fleet arrived at the northern coast of Skyrim, they were greeted by a powerful enchanter named Axedal. Axedal was a human from Sarthal who wasn't present there during the Night of Tears. Once he found out what the elves had done, he swore an oath of vengeance, which is why he met Isgramor and his army on the shore of Skyrim and imbued their weapons with powerful enchantments. Then, filled with rage and with their weapons enchanted, the Nords attacked the elves. It was a massacre. The elves tried to defend themselves, but they were defeated at every turn. The only meaningful elven resistance was put up by the Snow Prince on the island of Solstheim, until he was killed by a 12-year-old, and that was the end of that. Now, while Isgramor is credited as being the one who defeated the elves, it wasn't until the reign of King Harald, the 13th of Isgramor's line, that the elves were finally driven from Skyrim. Many of these elves were forced to go underground to survive, and that's when they stumbled upon Blackreach and met the Dwemer. At first, the Dwemer seemed nice and offered them sanctuary, but in the end, they had more sinister plans for the Snow Elves. They fed them a toxic fungi that rendered them blind. In fact, this toxic fungi became such a regular part of their diet that not only did the Snow Elves become blind, but their offspring as well. And that is how the Snow Elves became these blind, ugly creatures known as the Falmer. In addition to that, the Dwemer then proceeded to enslave them. But despite all the Dwemer's efforts, the Falmer eventually rebelled. And this started the War of the Crag, a series of bloody conflicts deep below the grounds of Skyrim, which the Nords were completely unaware of. This conflict lasted for many decades until one day the Dwemer disappeared. The exact details of the Dwemer's disappearance is unclear, but it is generally agreed upon that it had something to do with Kagrenak using his tools on the heart of Lorkhan, possibly with the intended goal of having the Dwemer achieve godhood. Obviously, the disappearance of the Dwemer was quite a stroke of fortune for the Falmer, but despite that, the Dwemer automatons were still around and functional, even without the Dwemer themselves. Still, they weren't enough to stop the Falmer from spreading throughout Blackreach, and some of them even started appearing above ground. And that is the history of the Falmer up until the events of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. In closing, I want to leave you with a quote from a book called The Falmer: A Study. And so the legends began, of small, blind, goblin-like creatures who would rise from the cracks of the earth in the dead of night to slaughter cattle, attack lonely travelers, and steal sleeping babes from their cribs. In recent years, however, the sightings of these creatures have become more and more frequent, their raids more organized, their attacks more brutal. In fact, one might even come to the conclusion that the Falmer are ready to change once again. Could it be true? Are the snow elves of ages past ready to reclaim their long-forgotten glory? Are they ready to surge to the surface and make war upon the light dwellers? If that happens, if the Falmer are indeed planning on reconquering Skyrim, I fear a horror neither man nor gods could possibly stand against. Hey guys, it's Mike. I just wanted to say one little thing. I neglected to mention in this video one little detail, which is that according to the book Frontier, Conquest and Accommodation, A Social History of Cyrodiil, it says that Isgomor was actually not the first human to migrate into Tamriel, and that he was actually following a long tradition of migration that was centuries old. So I just wanted to include that little correction there, which isn't that surprising considering how mythologized Isgomor is. Like, a lot of the stuff around Isgomor is heavily exaggerated, so you know, it's not really that surprising. Anyway, just wanted to mention that little detail. That being said, hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.